Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being covered in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined this week by Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, Arts and Features Editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome, Jen.
Hey, Dave. Just me this week.
Just us. Yeah, I had a hard time with that, but I think we'll be just fine. You do a great job when Thad's not around. We have a lot of fun, so it should be cool.
Halfway through, I'm going to switch into Thad drag and then do the news portion, so it should be fine.
Oh, that'll actually be fun. I'm down for a costume change. We haven't tried that one before. Which actually, that's a pretty good segue to, why don't you tell us what is on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
Ta-da! This week's North Coast Journal cover is about drag. Specifically, it is about family-friendly drag. And there has been a lot of controversy, a lot of discussion brewing about this, not just in Humboldt, but all over the country. And sometimes that discussion has left from using our words and gone into some really angry and in some cases, really violent confrontations. So to kind of set the stage a little bit, this week I talked to a lot of people who participate in family-friendly drag shows. Specifically, I went to the College of the Redwoods one that was at the end of April, and then followed up with some of the performers and organizers to talk about why they do this. To start on a little basic thing, drag is not a new phenomenon. Drag has been around, drag has been around for a really long time. And when I say really long, I mean, think Kabuki theater, think Chinese opera, think ancient Greek performance, think Dell'Arte, think, and not just the one in Blue Lake. In fact, drag has a really strong vaudeville history in America, and it continued through comedy all the way from, basically like, early variety shows, of course, movies like Some Like It Hot, and all the way up through to the Mrs. Doubtfire era. I think, though, when we think about the difference between a family movie that has drag in it and what the panic is over drag that is geared toward young people, families, kids, there seems to be a little bit of a distinction there that never gets said out loud, which is that when drag is done for and by LGBTQ people, when it's done to play with the conventions and not necessarily wind up reinforcing regular old heteronormative behaviors, when it allows somebody to actually be different, not just pretend to be different temporarily, that's when people freak out. So, and we've been having a lot of freakouts, right? The Proud Boys will show up at a library or at a brunch. Neo-Nazis showed up in Ohio. Ohio Nazis, Dave.
Oh, man.
I hate Ohio Nazis. Anyway, they show up and, make a big fuss. There's a lot of disturbing crossover between like right-wing Christian nationalists, neo-Nazi, white supremacist groups, and a really strong anti-drag queen story hour kind of event, that movement. And it is really a movement because it's gaining momentum, and it's definitely in Humboldt. We've had lots of backlash locally, whether it be criticism in the form of like the beware signs at the St. Mark's Lutheran Church, or whether it's the sort of online petition that had some very nasty hate speech in it, an online petition that made its way to the supervisors, Humboldt County supervisors, and had in it not only slurs, but also, saying we should kill all these people, right? That is something that some people have deemed, oh, it was a joke, it was trolling. It doesn't matter if it's a joke or if it's trolling. When somebody says that, now we're making terrorist threats. So, given that atmosphere is around us, right, in the middle of also this wave of anti-LGBTQ, particularly anti-trans legislation happening in other states, and with all of that happening, you got to ask yourself, or at least I have to ask myself, why still do it, right? Granted, there's always going to be some danger in doing any form of drag, at least in this climate. But why keep doing drag for families? Why do drag that's geared toward kids? And so I talked to a lot of folks, and they tended to give me the same answers. One being that for them, even though some of them, like Tucker Noir, who's a drag personality and performer who hosted the CR show, the education aspect is really important for her. And she talks about how she wants people to not only feel like this is a place you can be accepted, but she wants them to know drag history, to know that it's not this propaganda where people are saying that children are going to be hurt or groomed, etc. She wants to be able to educate the public and let people know that, especially, this is a way in to say, this is play, this is imagination, this is playing with gender. You don't have to feel bad when you don't fit all of these things, and you don't have to feel bad because you want to play with your identity some. So there's that aspect. There's also the things that they themselves got out of it. So for Kaylin Rivera, who is a trans man and the founder of Lost Coast Pride, for which this was a fundraiser, he talks about how when he was doing drag back in the late 90s, he's only returned to the stage recently for these fundraisers as Nasty Weather. But when, he was doing this, it was a way for him to kind of shake off the boundaries for a minute and try to exist another way, right? To experiment with, how would this feel if I let myself be myself? And that went from performing as a drag king to eventually transitioning and living as a trans man. So it's a kind of an exploration. At one point during the show, Tucker kind of defined drag as exploration and imagination and play around gender, right? But it could also be other things. It could be about, like, maybe, as she pointed out, she knew somebody who did drag as a lanternfish, which I got to see that. Yeah. But also, for example, when I talked to one of the instructors at Cal Poly Humboldt in the Critical Race, Gender, and Sexuality Studies Department, it's a long name. I'm going to try really hard not to screw it up. Paul Michael Leonardo Atienza, and he teaches in the Critical Race, Gender, and Sexuality Studies Department, and he also has a drag persona. We'll get to that in a second. But he talks about some of the fear around drag being about losing some norms, some cultural norms that people have held on to for a long time, and feeling like something is being taken away from them, and that they can stop people from feeling what they feel, being who they are, etc., and bring things back to a kind of an imaginary time when everybody was the same. But that time doesn't actually exist. There was never a time when everybody felt the same about everything, right? And he talks about what he teaches in his class about how some, colonialist ideas were really pushed onto, for example, Native people, people in Asian countries. He also teaches Asian American studies, kind of pushing this gender binary onto people who used to allow sort of more fluid identities and more complex identities, and that those were sometimes considered people who had a link to the spiritual world, a link to the supernatural. They were important and, revered members of cultures. So
Two spirits, right? You're talking about two spirits, for example?
among other identities. So thinking about this idea that once upon a time everybody was the same, it just never was. And he talks about trying to get people to return to that, or forcing that onto people being a losing battle. And that's frustrating, right? To be locked in a losing battle. So his drag personality, and this is the harder name. Give me a second. Maria Arte Sucia Churissima Tolentino is a very sassy, glamorous Filipina who embodies all of these traits that growing up, he himself was sort of teased for, right? Like, oh, your walk is too feminine, your voice is too high, your posture is this, you hang out with girls too much. But then he did this workshop one time where the exercise was like, what would happen if you let go of all shame? Like, what would that look like? And then he was like, well, it looks like Ma Arte. And he put together this character, and there's something of an outlet to it, right? So I really got a sense of how drag as an art form has really served the people doing it, but also I got to see how it serves the people in the audience. So, I mean, there is nothing for kids like watching grown-ups being silly, right? And I think the idea, we have, if I can go back for a second, we have like animation, right? And we have animation that's for kids, Disney movies, etc. And we have animation that is for adults. Don't let your kids watch like American Dad or whatever's on the Adult Swim, etc. Don't do that. Yeah, there's anime that my kids love, and there's anime that my kids can never see. So in the same way, different art forms are built for different audiences. Just like you would never take your kid to see some crazy, violent NC-17 movie, or maybe you would. I don't know your family. The drag shows that are geared toward kids are geared toward entertaining kids and reaching kids. So yeah, people dress up in like big stuffed animal, like Lion King suits and sing songs from the musical or lip sync to the musicals. People do all kinds of goofiness. They dress like kids and behave like kids. They talk in this kind of like Mother Goose voice. They do sing-alongs. It's all pretty innocent, honestly. Like I cannot imagine what anybody could object to. But that's me. At one point, Tucker Noir in the show came out in the beginning dressed as like an elf princess with like pointy ears and a purple gown and everything. And then after the intermission, she returned as an elf prince, right? So same costume except pants instead of a dress, and same pointy ears, but with a 5 o'clock shadow. And she said, before, what I was wearing was fine in the state of Tennessee. Now what I'm wearing, because I moved my eyeshadow to the bottom part of my face, it's a felony. And you really see how, for the kids, they were like, that's silly. Yeah. Right. And it was really interesting to see. Another thing that was really great was I got to talk to a teenager who participates in drag, and talk about the character that he made up and why it's this way. And he did a couple of different numbers, and the little kids went crazy. They were jumping out of their seats. They were screaming. I saw a mother going like, okay, calm down, honey. And we're like, she can't calm down. There's like a rock star on stage stomping around like full like grunge girl in combat boots and a dress, like singing an angsty song. Like, what? How can you calm down, right? This is like watching a rock concert for kids. And the same things were true about like wanting to be theatrical, wanting to have an outlet. And honest to God, when I look at what kids are going through, they're going through a lot more than I went through in my teen years. And if this is an outlet, give them all the outlets. It was really amazing to watch. And they also, all the performers that I talked to also talked about wanting to pass down those skills, that outlet, those, survival skills, basically, and a community of drag, which Tucker kind of talked about, having been a formerly very religious person. Um, Tucker talked about how drag took over the place that used to be church for her. And it was people coming together for a positive, wonderful, inspirational message and feeling good and feeling universal love and acceptance in the room. And I mean, you can't beat it with a stick. To kind of address some of the panic that's been happening around drag too, I really urge everybody to clip out and mail to your friends and relatives, like you're somebody's nana, the fear versus fact sidebar that Thad put together, where he interviewed Stacey Eads, the Humboldt County District Attorney. He interviewed Ferndale Police Chief Ron Slee. He interviewed people about their life in law enforcement and have they ever seen drag be an issue? Have they ever seen children harmed by drag? And spoiler, it's a no from all of them. And they talk about what really some of the concerns are. If you're really worried about children in Humboldt County and their safety and sexual abuse, they've got some places for you to send that worry. Unfortunately, it's way more complex and more difficult a thing than scapegoating one group if we really want to take care of kids.
Yeah, so I'm glad you were able to address or at least point people in the direction of that piece, because the prosecutor says that in her experience, she's worked with cases with blood relatives, step-parents, biological parents, foster parents, girlfriends and boyfriends, as well as family friends, coaches, after-school program aides, religious leaders, peers, neighbors, and teachers. And it's everywhere, but not in this community that's receiving so much criticism unnecessarily. So it's a great read. It's worth people's time to check it out.
It really is, and I really appreciate that doing this. I got to do the part where I go to exciting and fun shows full of happy people, and then he had to go and talk to people about the worst aspect of their job. So thanks, Thad.
We appreciate you, Thad, even when you're not here.
We do.
Into the ether. Well, thank you, Jen, big time for covering this and for being there and reporting on such a positive experience that hopefully it's contagious. People, they read it and they check it out and they consider checking it out next time because there'll be more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. Why don't we pivot to your other hat besides cover writer? And why don't you tell us a little bit about what's on the Arts and Features beat this week?
Okay, I have two of my favorite outdoor enthusiasts. Is that the best umbrella to put them under? Sarah Hobart, who, as you know, birder. She writes a lot of really great birding stories for us. This week, she is talking about her car.
That's right.
Do you remember Car Talk?
Yeah. Oh,
it
yeah.
Used to be on NPR.
Click and Clack, right?
Yes, Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers. So she starts off by talking about how they used to have this big question of, who's harder on cars, men or women, and what professions are hardest on cars. And she's like, I got it though, hands down, birders. And I was like not buying it when she told me this. But then as I read it and saw how much damage she has done to her car, driving down country dirt roads in the rain and just like spilling stuff and racing around trying to find birds in backwoods areas. Yeah, it's bad. And I just want to say prayers up for the guy who detailed her car, because the section where she talks about what was found from under the seat, he'd pulled out 3 sets of binocular lens caps, a broken tripod, 7 socks, 4 field guides, a bottle of lens cleaner, a dozen microfiber cloths, a spare rain jacket, 2 umbrellas, a pair of jeans, a pound of bird seed. I don't know if that was all together or distributed. 13 pens, my missing registration tabs, and a turkey sandwich that had disappeared in 2021. My God. So yes, birders, you win.
It seems too accurate to be made up, right? Like that's a finite, discrete list there.
Yeah, and I applaud her being brave in sharing how incredibly dirty her car was. Respect. And she also includes a couple of bird pictures that she got by destroying her car, and for her, it's worth it.
And I like how she said some of the roads have potholes the size of a heifer, like because you can totally
Yes.
picture it. You're looking
Yeah,
for
you
the
could lose a
hawk,
cow.
and then you just disappear.
Absolutely.
It can happen.
If she doesn't send in her copy for the next column, I'm going to start looking in potholes. That's my
Yeah,
plan.
she went missing.
Um,
Oh no.
and our other outdoor enthusiast, the always surprising Mike Kelly, author of our Washed Up column. A while ago, do you remember I wrote about sustainable seafood and like ocean friendly restaurants?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to take the blame for this story,
Mhm.
but Mike was inspired to imagine his own billionaire funded sustainable restaurant. But Mike's idea of sustainable is like, you got to ask yourself, but what cost?
Mhm.
He says, um, at the Washed Up Seafood Galley, everything is extra sustainable because my staff of expert beachcombers only harvests already dead or dying organisms, and there's no bycatch of non-target species because all encrusting organisms and parasites go into our famous bisque.
Wow.
My God, Mike. Somewhere around there, he ends up telling us about the hake, a weird, mysterious, but also delicious fish. I just wouldn't eat the one that Mike makes for you at his imaginary restaurant. It's imaginary. Please don't send me emails about how you got sick by using a foraged crab leg as a straw, because it's not.
Don't do it.
I wouldn't order the red and green algae crudité, but that's me. But yeah, he talks about the weirdness of hake that have these giant mouths, little pointy teeth, delicious white flesh. Um, but also they have this weird thing where they either travel perpendicular to the shore or horizontal to the shore, and nobody knows why they switch between. The whole school just, I guess, kind of does it.
They do their jam. I think it's in part, I mean, just from reading the article, they go to really deep water. So
Yes,
maybe they got to come up somehow.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And I have to say, like, this is one of those times where, um, again, ew, Mike, but also I really cannot believe we found this guy who is just like, goes to the beach, will find something dead, as you do when you go on the beach, you find something like a weird glob or a dead fish or something with bugs on it, and then will tell us a whole crazy imagined story about it. I feel grateful.
It's super cool, actually, that like he weaves in so many facts in a way that just is really digestible and entertaining. But then, like when he talks about how many there are, like miles of them, when they swim, 12 mile. The school can be 12 miles long and 7.5 miles wide.
Right? It's vast. It's
70
vast.
feet
And
thick.
then I don't know, one of them at the front just decides now we're going perpendicular, and everybody does. I don't know. But given that he's a fisheries biologist, he has this really great body of knowledge to pull from. And he does it in such a weird way, and we really appreciate it.
And this is like a pretty ugly fish too, like as these things go. I had to Google it because I said, wait a minute, this is a little picture of one like in the article, but then I thought,
Yeah.
well, if they get to be 3 feet, like what do they look like? They are sketch.
Nasty.
They are nasty looking. Apparently they go into like imitation crab meat, which is pretty wild.
Yes, surimi. So when you have a California roll that's not during crab season, that would be our friend the hake.
All right.
And my grandfather used to say that the uglier the fish, the better it tasted. Sturgeon, what's up? Not traditionally handsome. But at the same time, I remember when I lived in Japan, I noticed that nobody was eating catfish, even though it was available. And I asked a friend, I was like, how come nobody eats catfish? And they were like, oh, they're so hideous. And I was like, what now? I'm like, did I or did I not just eat some squid fermented in its own innards?
Right.
Catfish, they are hideous. but ugly hake, delicious California roll.
Well, right on, Jen. Thank you so much for this. I mean, I'm going to go try to eat one. Like now that I know about it, I'll
I
lay
know
off.
this week's plan. Just hake and drag all week long.
There you go. There's a party in there somewhere for sure. Thank you, Jen, so much. We appreciate you, and also especially the fact that you had to cover the whole spectrum of articles today on solo. You did a great job. We appreciate it.
You were very brave with me, Dave. Thank you.
It's fun. But that's unfortunately all the time we have. So North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up, stay informed. Also available online 24/7, so you can check them out anytime. Thank you out there for listening. Thank you again, Jen. And until next time, take care.